I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Hey everybody, welcome back. If you missed it, there is a video on YouTube. It's the mid-year economic outlook I did with the chief economist of Zillow, Skylar Olson, that is on the YouTube of The Weekly Seattle. I'll also link that on my Instagram. We do have another video that's coming up. I don't know by the time this airs, I'm not sure if it'll be up, but it's with Emily Parker, my former boss and the founder of the new media company. So that was really fun to do the video. Today we're not doing video, but also a little behind the scenes just for my devoted fans and listeners. I was feeling pretty good about doing that Zillow interview. It was like, you know, it was a good get and whatever, feeling great. We wrapped, I go to the bathroom, and at some point, somehow, I had ripped my pants. So, you know, I feel like the world brings you up and brings you right back down. Yeah, big rip in the back. Luckily, I was sitting down for that interview. So everybody has a rip their pants story, right, guys? If you do, please tell me. Okay, where we're at today, again, with no video but audio, is at the World Trade Center. No, we are not in New York. We are here in Seattle. It's a members organization founded by the Port of Seattle, and it's located across from Pier 66. The whole goal is to bring business leaders together, which we're doing because I've brought Kathi Lentzsch with me. Hello.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
I feel like you know you've made it when you don't have a title. You're just a business mogul. Because you're just a board member, you're a former CEO, and you're just out and about just making moves. So I'm going to read a little bit more about you, and bear with me because it's a lot, you guys. This is a pretty impressive guest. She's the co-chair for the Women Corporate Directors Foundation of Washington State. She's a board member of the Skagit Valley Malting. She's on the board of advisors for UW's Center for Leadership and Strategic Thinking. She's on the Transforming Age Board, which is a nonprofit improving lives of older adults. Prior to this, she was a board member for Forefront Ventures, which dealt with cannabis cultivation. She was a board member of the Pharmacy Value Alliance, CEO of Bartell Drugs, as I mentioned, interim CEO of Gump in San Francisco, president of the Enesco Gift Division, CEO of Elephant Pharmacy in California, leadership roles at Pottery Barn, WorldMarket, and Pier1 Imports. Are you tired? Oh my goodness.
It's been fun.
Yeah?
Really fun.
Do you miss, like, I know I didn't prep you for this question, but are you glad to be out of the CEO role and more into the board role?
Yes and no.
Yeah. Different challenges.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's a lot of stress that comes with the CEO role. Having done it 3 times, I finally decided that was enough was enough.
Yeah.
You know, so moved on.
Yeah, makes sense. So we'll get into the top 5 stories, and I'm so excited for today's discussion because I have a lot to talk about with Bartell's and some of the other experience. But I always ask my guest, why they're passionate about what they do. And for you, you've got such a wide variety of experience. I guess, what are you passionate about? What are you most passionate about?
Well, since I was a little kid, I, for some reason, was very passionate about the world, people around the world. I went to a birthday party when I think I must have been around 5 years old, and there was the most beautiful little girl at this birthday party in native dress, and I think she was from somewhere in Africa, and I still remember her name to today. It was Yasmin, and she made such a mark on me, and after that, everything I thought about for my career was international. And so, yeah, I pursued foreign languages. I studied 3 foreign languages. I was a foreign exchange student. I did a lot of things to try to make it that way. And then when I got out into the business world, the international piece was the most important piece for me when considering a job. And so I went with companies that were going to enable me to work in other places. I love working with other cultures. It's fabulous.
Yeah, very cool. So today's top 5 stories. Shareholders approve HomeStreet and Sunflower Bank merger. We'll talk about the future of pharmacies. The Electrician strike ends. Costco lawsuit, and the Getty Images co-founder leaves the board. So let's just jump right in. The first one is HomeStreet Bank and Sunflower Bank. So this was actually already announced in January, so if you're an avid reader of the news, this is not new news to you. However, what happened last week that came out in the articles is that the shareholders approved this merger. And that sounds like the next step is for regulatory approval. So basically, it's more likely to happen, is what they're saying. HomeStreet Bank is a Seattle bank, and it's merging with FirstSun Capital, which is a Denver company, but it's the holding group of a Dallas-based bank called Sunflower Bank. HomeStreet's still going to keep its name. And to me, from the articles, it sounded like HomeStreet was the one kind of struggling and needed to combine with FirstSun. So Kathi, you were at Bartell Drugs, and you were there when Pennsylvania-based Rite Aid acquired them. So let's sort of talk about the difference between mergers and acquisitions in your own words, not in the fancy words. But
I'm no attorney.
Yeah, I guess like kind of what do you feel the difference is, and was there ever talk of merging with Rite Aid instead of the acquisition?
Right. To the consumer, there doesn't appear to be much difference between a merger and an acquisition. Mm-hmm. There's different ways it can be handled. You can merge and keep your name, and they often say you don't do that in an acquisition, but you can do that in an acquisition. It's all
Bartell's did that.
Yeah,
right?
it's all about what you negotiate. Mm. And so in our case, from my perspective, it was entirely up to the family what they wanted to do and what was going to be the best for them from a tax perspective, from, a net perspective, all the things that count when you're trying to sell a company. They'd been around 130 years, and I wanted to see them do as well as they could.
Yeah.
So they were the ones who decided that.
Yeah. And this article says the next step is regulatory approval.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you guys?
It took forever.
Really? Like how long?
Yeah. Part of it was because we were so big in Washington State. We believe we had the largest market share. And so when you're merging with somebody else who also has, as a retailer, also has stores in the state, it makes you even bigger, and they worry about fair competition. Mm-hmm. So
becoming like a monopoly sort of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So they were, questioning us on different things, and it just slowed it down quite a bit. But, we were able to handle it. It was one of the reasons it took us as long as it did to sell the company, because we worked on it from beginning to end for about 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Yeah. I was curious how long that took. Okay.
Yeah.
So Rite Aid acquires them in 2020, soon before you left, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I knew that I knew the minute we decided to look to sell it that I'd be out of a job the minute that, after we did it. And the day we signed the contract was my last day. Yeah.
So Rite Aid has filed for bankruptcy, if you guys don't know that already. So they're closing a lot of Bartell locations. Did you have concerns when the deal went through? Did you feel like this could be happening? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Rite Aid has had its challenges for decades, and we all knew that. But they're a survivor. Somehow they survived. And I've watched them go through different CEOs and different strategies. I remember in the 90s when the CEO at that time came in and decided the key to success was going to be bringing all their alcohol, their liquor, their whiskey to the front of the store. Oh my God, it was horrible in my view. Yeah.
Why?
Here they are, a drugstore about health, and they brought all of that to the front of the store, which never made sense to me because that's a low margin business. So they've tried lots of different things, but they have survived. And so in our view, if they felt they could afford it and worked with us on the things that we really cared about, that's what was important to us. And we wanted to be sure we remained loyal to the community. We wanted to keep the Bartell's name. We wanted them to keep as many employees as they could, things like that. And they stepped up for all of that, at least initially.
I was going to say, I just went to a Rite Aid recently. Or not a Rite Aid. Yeah, I went to Rite Aid, but I've also been to a lot of Bartells. And I used to love walking around Bartells because there was all this stuff. It was so perfectly organized and people were so friendly. And I definitely felt the difference. I knew about this Rite Aid purchase, but I bet listeners, even if you didn't know about this Rite Aid purchase,
you could figure it out.
You could probably figure it out. There was a shift and there was a change. And I think sometimes we were blaming the supply, like the empty shelves, on supply not being there because of COVID. But I would guess, would you agree that like it has a lot more to do with kind of Rite Aid running things?
Well, I think COVID had a lot to do with it initially, and it's hard to separate those two. That then impacts all their analytics going forward. So being in their shoes, trying to understand how much they need in a store, that history has to build back up, and it's very, very difficult. So, and then assuming they're in a cash crunch right now, I would think they wouldn't want a lot of inventory in a store. If they are stocking Bartell's the way they stock a Rite Aid, they probably didn't have the same amount of customers that we used to have in a Bartell's, and so we would probably have run out faster. There was a lot for them to learn. Now customer count's probably gone down, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I don't even go in there anymore because I know that like my shampoo is not going to be there. Like it's all going to be empty.
Yeah, I don't either, and that's a terrible thing to say, but I can't get what I need there.
Yeah.
And downtown Seattle's I live downtown. It's become a desert when it comes to pharmacies. Everyone's closing, and So now I'm really sticking with online ordering for my pharmacy needs.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about pharmacies in a second. But one more question on this story. So we sort of shifted into talking about bankruptcy. I'm not saying that HomeStreet is going into bankruptcy, but since we're kind of talking about that, you've been through some companies and some boards and talked about bankruptcy. What's something that you think people don't know about a company going bankrupt? And also, is there kind of a common theme as to why? Like, is it always just shitty leadership that causes it? Or like, kind of what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, what causes a company to go bankrupt? Oh, there's so many variables, and it can go back for years. So, as an example, and it's not necessarily always leadership. It could be what investors want to do or don't want to do. There could be so many reasons. But at the end of the day, the thing from my perspective that's most important in a company is cash. We say cash is king. Mm-hmm. And what often happens in the companies that go bankrupt isn't that they don't have cash. It's that they don't have it flowing in the door when they need it.
Okay.
So, if you can't pay your bills, you're not going to survive ultimately. Many companies last a long time, even though they're not paying their bills through negotiations, et cetera. And some are able to get out of it. Sometimes investors will come in and give them money. Sometimes there's just so many different places you can go to look for money. Sometimes there's grants. It depends on what you do.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, if you don't have enough cash, that's what kills it. I was working with a company that 10 or 12 years ago, a startup, took out a big loan. And they had a balloon payment coming up, 12 years later.
What's a balloon payment?
A balloon payment is when you always pay your debt back a little bit at a time, and you have a timeline on which you're expected to pay it back. And depending on what kind of loan you get, you can negotiate to pay less for the first few years, and then all of a sudden you pay a whole lot at the end.
Got it.
And startups will do that because they believe they're going to be successful at that point, right? Well, this balloon payment was so big that there wasn't, it was more than 2/3 of their top line sales.
Wow.
And there was no way it was going to be paid back. And so, that is why I said to you earlier, it can go way back when they made decisions. It might not be the same management team. It varies.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so you mentioned pharmacies. Our next article, so technically this wasn't an article that came out yesterday. It did come out, or this week or last week, but it did come out in June. And you know what? I make the rules, so I decided to put it in here. But you showed me this article. It's something you have on your LinkedIn. It's a Fortune article. It's a long one, but it's kind of talking about the future of pharmacies. Where do we see it going? My kind of takeaway from this was that we're seeing less pharmacists because of pay and conditions. We're seeing pharmacies closing at an increasing rate because of reimbursement rates for the medications that we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. And then I've learned about PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers. Specifically, 3 of them control 80% of how prescriptions are processed. So they're kind of controlling how much the pharmacy gets back. So do you agree with the article? Do you feel like these are the reasons why we're seeing less? What can you share about that?
Yes, it was actually, from my perspective, the reason I posted it, one of the best articles I've read explaining to people in layman's language what was going on. At the end of the day, in my opinion, the biggest culprit are the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers. When I was in pharmacy 20 years ago, we really weren't dealing with them much, and it wasn't a problem. But they came around for good reason. They were going to be administrators for insurance companies between the retailer and the insurance company. And so you paid a fee for that, and it made a lot of sense. But then they started building those fees, and then they started hiding some fees and more fees. And what might surprise you to know is today, companies, retailers, drugstores don't often know what they're going to even be reimbursed when they sell something.
So let's walk us through that. So the pharmacy is buying the medication, for, let's say $500 from the big pharma. Mm-hmm. And then I go in to get this medication. Let's say I pay $50 and my insurance pays the rest. However, you're saying they're not always paying the rest.
Exactly.
Right. And so what price is the PBM setting? Are they setting the $500 price, or are they setting, they're not involved in what my insurance pays, but.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a little more complicated than that. There's like 3 or 4 big drug distributors that we buy from that you negotiate to get prices from them. Insurance companies set their price, PBMs set their fees. So there's a lot of lack of transparency by the time it gets through the PBM to the drugstore. And
and I bet your everyday person probably doesn't know all these people are involved and how much they're.
Yeah. So we could sell, I'll use smaller numbers than you were using. We could sell something for $10. A person comes in with insurance and they pay $10 for their drug.
Yeah.
And then we get reimbursed $2.
So you're losing $8 on a transaction?
Well, they've paid us $8. They've paid us, sorry, I didn't think this through. They've paid us $10. But let's say the drug actually cost us 12.
I see.
And then they only reimbursed us 2. We lose 10. Mm-hmm. We lose more or as much as they paid for it. Mm-hmm. You can go into the hole with it. And we often had discussions about this at Bartell's because, obviously the question would be, well, just don't sell that drug if that's what you find out after you've sold it the first time. Well, it's not quite that easy because, on average, we had 2.5 medications per patient. So if you eliminate that one drug, they're probably going to go somewhere else and get the other 1.5.
Right. And then also buy their greeting card and their candy and
all
their
the front of the store.
Else. Yep.
Exactly. And I was a believer that we needed to be there for when the customer needed us.
Right. You also don't want somebody having to drive to another neighborhood further.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So why, I think we kind of talked about, why the cost for the medication for the patient is so much.
Well, it's, one thing people might not realize is, the research and development that big pharma has to do to get to a drug, they're doing that and they don't know if the drug's going to work. They don't know if it's going to be successful. So imagine you've put millions of dollars into developing a particular medication and then it's not approved. And you're out those millions of dollars. So what do they have to do? Well, they're developing something else and they're spending millions of dollars, but that one's successful. And then when they sell it, they have to make up for all the other losses. Mm-hmm. So, it's very tough, I think, for big pharma to know when they're going to land something and when they're not. So that's part of the reason things look more expensive.
Yeah.
And now with where insurance is, et cetera, there's just these other variables that have come into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you fix the America's health insurance problem?
Oh my God, I would love to.
One last question on this. So sort of the counter argument from the PBMs.
Correct.
Is they're saying, it's just like small business complaining about big business. It's just like small businesses saying that they can't compete because of Amazon. These small pharmacies just can't compete because they're too small. Like, do you think there's any validity to that argument? Do you feel like they're just being defensive?
I don't think they're just being defensive. Buying power always comes into how much you pay for something. And when they're small, they don't have a lot of buying power. Like the big guys have billions of dollars,
Yeah. But do you feel like
those guys,
pharmacy benefit managers are ultimately more to blame than the size of the business?
I believe that. I feel safe saying that. I think at this point there needs to be some regulatory policies coming out when it comes to PBMs because it just feels like it's getting worse and worse. Every year.
Cool. Okay, so pharmacies are closing. We're not getting our medications. What a fun time. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I feel bad for the small guys. And, we were regional, but we were considered small, and it was very, very hard on us.
Yeah, with Bartell. Yeah.
Yeah, at Bartell's, right.
Okay, our third story is the electricians end strike. I didn't know they were on strike, but more than 1,000 electricians went on strike in April in Seattle, and now they're back to work after approving a 3-year contract. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 46, negotiated with the National Electrical Contractors Association. They were negotiating for higher pay, paid holidays, increased safety measures, and I'm sure other things. One thing I thought was interesting is that it's called the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which feels like an old school name, and the lead negotiator was a woman. So,
that's cool.
I wonder if they're going to change that.
Yeah.
So you, Kathi, you've led a lot of businesses with hourly workers. How did you decide their wages, and did you have any kind of difficult situations around their wage and them wanting more, anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, that often pops up. Being in the business I was in retail, you have a lot of typically minimum wage workers. That's what the competition tends to pay. I fortunately always I was with companies that allowed me to pay more. We were in a position to in many cases because I believe that you get what you pay for. So we would look at what the minimum wage was as a starting point, and then we'd look at what the market rate was, which is what everybody's ultimately paying, and then we'd determine how much above that we wanted to be. So we did that in a lot of the companies that I worked with, and what it did is, we had far less attrition than other retailers did, and it enabled us to get people who were the best of the best.
I mean, it sounds like a simple concept, but you still have companies paying minimum wage and the least amount they can.
Yeah, you still do. Probably because, you still have Prel shampoo at a really cheap price and you aren't bringing in the revenues to cover it, right?
True.
So, the Bartells were so smart. They believed that if they could get the right people in there, that it would bring in more customers, and customers would spend more, and it would pay off. And they were right. In the long term, they didn't expect everything that happened with the pandemic.
Right.
None of us did, and PBMs, et cetera, that were painful for us at the end.
Yep. So how did you handle, you said that there was some Bartell negotiations, and because this story is about a union negotiating, and was it unionized?
We had, I think, if I recall correctly, about 6 stores out of 65 that were unionized. We typically paid, as I was mentioning, better than market rate. And so they're really, unions come around because employees are unhappy because they don't feel like they're being compensated well. And I wasn't around when those 6 stores became unionized, so I don't know why. But we typically had a pretty easy time with the unions when the contracts came up and we had to renegotiate, because we already paid well. They'd often ask for a certain wage, and we were already paying more than that. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, I didn't understand why employees really wanted to be part of the union and pay the dues they paid. What were they getting for it?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe, like you said, it was something way back when.
From way back when, yeah.
Okay, our 4th story is Costco is being sued. Costco is Issaquah-based, and it's being sued by a Connecticut woman for not publicly saying what they're charging online and that it was more expensive than in person. So basically, she went to buy toilet paper. It was something like $35. I'm going to round. It was like $35 online, and then if she went to the store, it was going to be closer to like $32.
Right.
So Costco also was, I think, already made aware of this, and they're like, no, we'll do it. We'll be better. And then they didn't. So that's why she's suing them. You have a lot of experience in e-commerce. Is this common to mark it up online? Is it common to kind of charge more online versus in the store?
I don't know what's common anymore, to be frank. When e-commerce first came on, this was a question that started back then. What do we do? Do we
Because you have to pay for shipping, right?
You have to pay for shipping, right? And so was it better to mark up the goods and tell the customer they got free shipping? Or was it better to keep it at that price and
pass through the shipping charge?
Through the shipping charge. And, honestly, if you had bricks and mortar, to me, it made more sense to keep it at the price and then add the shipping to it, which most understood. But back then, many companies didn't know how to estimate what their shipping was going to be. They used to do it based on the price of something. And that doesn't always work.
Yeah. So, well, you don't know where you're shipping to.
You know where you're shipping to. Yeah. I mean, and then there's the other thing that's happened where companies are shipping free and they're not marking it up. It's the same price as bricks and mortar. So, I mean, that's digging a deep hole into the net profit of some of these guys, and you can't get out of that. So if you're trying to compete, you're stuck with having to go after that. And I think that's a sad situation to be in. People seem to be willing to pay for services today. It would seem to me that they would pay for shipping.
So you said something about brick and mortar. Do you have a thought into the future as to where you see brick and mortar going? I know you've worked for, WorldMarket, Pier1, all those kinds of things. We had talked about we go into the stores and we're not seeing as full of supplies. Are they going away?
I wish I was a fortune teller when it comes to this. I think there's a lot working against brick and mortar, and I will hear other people from the industry say they think it's coming back. But, when you think about what's going on out there, people aren't consuming as much as they used to. There's a real concern about what's going into landfills, or maybe I'm in my bubble in Seattle. I don't know, but you know, that's happening. And then the whole way we dress today, you don't need your business wardrobe and your casual wardrobe and your play wardrobe, and you know, it's all the same today. So you buy less clothes. It just feels, and then thinking about the younger generation, they, as you've probably read, love experiences over spending money on things. And I mean, I personally think they're right. You know, and I grew up in the generation that was the big spenders. So I think that there's a large potential that these bricks and mortar stores will end up, if they stay around, being showrooms.
Oh, yeah.
So people can come in if they want to see something, like sit on a sofa or, you know.
I just bought a beach chair. That's why I went to like 3 different stores. That's why I was at Rite Aid to try and find a beach chair, because I wanted to sit in it to see like how high it was. I'm going to the Gorge, so it needs to be less than 9 inches. I wanted to be comfortable. And yeah, that's part of why I went in person. But I had to go to 3 different stores and for them to even have 1 or 2 chairs. And
you found one finally?
I did find one at Dick's Sporting Goods.
But you didn't have choices, really, right?
Not really, no. I mean, like, more choices than any other store. I think there were like 2 different ones I could look at, 2 or 3, but...
and that's where online shopping has it over bricks and mortar. They can provide choices.
Which is a bummer, because I want to do in person, but then it's like I'm not incentivized to do in person. But I get that they can't have all the stock.
Well, I think the other thing that's a bummer that I loved so much about retail is good retailers provided an incredible experience in past years. Yeah. I mean, you never, think about when Disney first opened and it was like going and to an amusement park when you went into the Disney store years ago. And all of that, I think, is going to have to go away because they can't afford it. Yeah. It's really, really unfortunate. I hope somebody figures it out.
My first job after college, I didn't tell you this, but my first job after college was working at WorldMarket I was a seasonal employee.
Oh, yay.
And I felt like we treated employees really well, and it was really nice. Employees and customers coming in, so fun fact.
It was a wonderful place.
Okay, our last article, we're going to talk about boards. So Getty Images co-founder leaves the board. So I researched Getty Images. I did not know it was a Seattle company, but I'm sure most people are familiar. It's where you can get stock images and stock music and such. But in 1995, it was founded by Mark Getty and Jonathan Klein in London, and they were family members. And then 2 years later, they relocate to Seattle. They acquire some companies. They get bigger. They eventually sell to private equity in 2008. Then 4 years later, that company puts it up for sale, and Carlyle Group, another private equity company, buys it. Then in 2018, the Getty family buys it back. I have not seen that happen. I mean, that I've been aware of. You've seen it?
Yes.
But do you know off the top of your head a company?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know there's a couple in my past life that I've seen. Yeah.
Well, probably because they sell the company, they see what private equity does to it, and they're like, wait, just kidding.
I know who one of them was. It was Boudin Bakery in San Francisco. The family came in, and they're a 150-year-old company.
Yeah. Was it because they were like not liking what they were doing?
I think it was suffering. From what I understand, it wasn't doing well, and they came in and got a deal and brought it back.
Nice.
Yeah, cool.
So it's back with the Getty family, and so Jonathan Klein, he remained as CEO throughout this time from 1995 to 2015, and after that, he stayed on the board. So the news article that came out is that he's leaving the board. The other co-founder, Mark Getty, who I mentioned, he's remaining as the chair of the board, and then there are 10 board members currently, 2 of which are women. So have you had an experience serving on a board with a founder, and is that kind of a unique situation? I imagine they're like, this is my baby, I don't want to listen to advice, but...
I've had experience as a CEO and as being on a board working with a founder.
Yeah, tell me about that.
And, it depends on the founder. It can be crazy fun. It can be inspirational and energizing, and, it could be really cool to be working with them. It can also be incredibly challenging. Yeah. As the company matures, most of these founders are amazing entrepreneurs, and they have this entrepreneurial ability that isn't necessarily a good thing as the company gets more mature. And what I've seen is they typically don't like it when boards are doing what boards do, and that's helping set strategy, making big decisions, those kinds of things. The entrepreneur, the founder wants to make all the decisions, and that's when the things kind of go bad.
I can see that, because I think the reason you start a company and you're an entrepreneur is because you want to make these decisions.
Yeah. But people can do it. Look at Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's a common reason why you think a founder would leave? This article doesn't say why he left. He said it was no negative things happening, but why do you see founders leaving?
I think it's disagreements with the CEO or the board mostly.
I would imagine.
Maybe they're tired, but most of these guys have unbounded energy. It's incredible. And they're driven to succeed. And I think they see others making decisions as they think they can make them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you know when it's time for you to leave a board? Because I've mentioned so many that you're on. When does it feel like the right time to leave?
Well, when your term ends, obviously, is one of the right times to leave. But for me personally, if I'm not adding value to the company, or it's a very dysfunctional board and becomes an added stress to my life, then I start thinking about leaving the board. Now, that's a very serious thing to leave a board before your term is up, and you don't want to leave the board in a lurch. So if you decide as a board member to do that, you need to do it the right way. And the right way may be a different way from board to board, depending on what the situation is and whether it's public or private. Mm-hmm. I left a board once, but I worked very closely with the board on replacing myself.
Yeah.
And making sure they had somebody that was better than me on the board.
Yeah. So when you think of, I'm kind of jumping around on our list of questions here, but what do you think about when you're thinking about joining a board? And you and I had talked at one point about the difference between for-profit and nonprofit boards and your experience on which ones you've been trying to get into. Do you have a preference? Are they different experiences?
Well, I think when you and I talked, I was driving myself to really get on some more public boards because I'm very interested in the public side of business. Mm-hmm. It also happens to pay better, but that isn't what drives me to sit on a board at the end of the day. I'll walk away from one with high pay if I don't think it's right for me. But I was looking for more public and ended up, some for-profits came up, which I was debating whether to do because I didn't want my time taken up with that if some other opportunities came through. But I found the public for-profit boards more challenging to get at the end of the day. I talked to somebody recently, one gal talked to 150 boards and ended up with 3 seats. Can you imagine?
Seems like not a lot.
Oh my God. And now 3 board seats is a lot for an individual, but to only have, she went to 150 companies to get 3 seats.
Do you feel like age and gender play into that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Boards are trying to get past gender. They're trying to get past race. They're trying to be fairer about that.
I feel like there's no age maximum on a board, or is there?
Well, the SEC has pushed for age maximums just as they pushed for term limits. And I believe that term limits are important. The companies used to have, and some still do, people that sit on boards for 20 years. And I think you become too inside the company. It's better to have an outside view and be objective. I see, to me, 6 years is probably the ideal because it takes you time to ramp up and then you start to apply your knowledge and learn from it. And then, so I think that's better. And still today, a lot of them are 9 to 10 years.
Wow.
And then that impacts age, where they start to look at age because, the SEC has come out with, in their mind, age limits. Different boards have different age. They decide it for themselves, but it can't be higher than a certain age, which I think it's 75. Some are 73. And so if they expect you to serve 3 terms and you're 65 and 9 is 74. And if your age limit is 73, boom, they don't go after you, which, it's really a shame because there's a lot of people with a lot of wisdom that have done a lot in their careers that could help these folks. Right. Yeah. And just as I believe boards should have diversity from the age perspective with youth, now people need experience, but you typically see boards with all 50 and 60-year-olds. And I really think there should be 40-year-olds on a board who are bringing some of that energy and vibe, et cetera, to it. So I just think we have to get better at that. Yeah,
for them to all look different in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And actually, I should mention, it's been proven that with women on boards, and maybe you've talked about this in the past, it's been proven that boards that have women on them, those companies are more successful than boards that don't.
I love that. I love to hear that. That's right. Well, and I think that proves the conversation and the argument of I guess some people can push back and be like, I don't want to have women on my board for diversity's sake, diversity for diversity's sake. But this is a business argument, is that it's actually going to be better for your business. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. They bring in different points of view and you think differently. You ask questions differently. Sure. It's, yeah. It's a good thing.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about at time. So is there anything else that you want to plug for the audience to know? Any events coming up?
Let's see. Oh, boy. I do all kinds of events. There's going to be an event on October 10th called 50/50 Women on Boards, and it's an organization that is driving to having 50% of board members being female by 2050.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right.
Love that.
So that's one thing that's happening that I'm involved with. I do a lot in this area to try to help women get the kinds of things done that they want to get done. Something else I'd love to plug. It's a nonprofit board that I just joined called Refugee Artisan Initiative, or RAI for short, RAI. Okay. They're out of Lake City. And this group is providing refugees and immigrant women with jobs that pay a fair wage, and they're training them. They're helping them learn their English. They're all providing a community. A lot of these women feel very isolated. They don't know anybody, and we have a workshop that they come into, and they all have lunch together and make friends. And so it's a wonderful thing, and we've seen women do wonderful things. They'll come over here. They could have been professionals where they were before, and their license isn't accepted here. So they end up doing the things we're doing now. Mostly what we've taught them is how to sew. And then we have our own online program where we sell our products online. But even more than that, we do it it's all upcycled. We do it with materials that would have gone into landfill. So, somebody like an Amazon might donate their sheets to us that are returns because you can't resell sheets. And then we make things out of those sheets. So it's this wonderful circular economy.
That's awesome. So one more time, cool. The company, the organization called?
Refugee Artisan Initiative.
Okay. We'll have to take a look at that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kathi. And thank you to the World Trade Center for hosting us. This has been really fun. And remember to check out those videos on YouTube. I'll put some links in the show notes. So thank you again.
Thanks, Rachel.
This has been The Weekly. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at theweeklyseattle@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.